this very strange project. It's a city that's 170 kilometers long, and it's basically a line cutting straight across a desert, and you can travel from one end to the other end in just 20 minutes.
Saudi Arabia wanted to build one of the most ambitious projects ever, a 106-mile mirrored megacity called The Line, designed to redefine urban life.
Saudi Arabia wants to build a city dubbed The Line.
The Lion? I want no part of that.
I'm going to be reacting to the line.
This is definitely just a way for those in power to have more control.
The ingenious design of the city of future.
It's designed in 3 dimensions. Who do you think is going to be at the top?
Instead, it became famous for delays, massive costs, and plans far too bold to ever finish on time. After Western investors grew skeptical, China stepped in with $1.74 billion and all its engineering might.
So the existing model of cities, it's based on problem and solution because it's being fixed all the time. But if it's top-down, then you can design something like this.
Suddenly, the line is moving again. The question is, why is China so invested in a futuristic desert city, and what does it hope to gain from it? What is the line? Think of it this way. Saudi Arabia wants to build a city that's 106 miles. But here's the wild part. This city would only be 200 meters wide. That's like 2 football fields put side by side. And the whole thing would be 500 meters tall, which makes it taller than the Empire State Building. The design calls for 2 parallel structures running through the desert, covered in mirrors that reflect the landscape around them. The original plan said 9 million people would live there in a space of just 13.12 square miles. This whole thing is part of NEOM, a $500 billion project that Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman dreamed up. He sees it as the main attraction of his Vision 2030 plan, which basically aims to make Saudi Arabia less dependent on selling oil. Now here's where it gets really different from regular cities. No cars will be allowed here. Instead, everything you need is supposed to be within a 5-minute walk. Grocery store, school, doctor, coffee shop, all of it. And if you need to go from one end of the city to the other, there's a super fast train that supposedly gets you there in 20 minutes. The whole city would run on 100% renewable energy with 0 carbon emissions. Solar panels, wind turbines, the works. Artificial intelligence would control everything from transportation to making sure everyone has clean water and electricity. Those mirrored walls aren't just for looks. They're supposed to blend the building into the desert so it doesn't stick out like a sore thumb, while also letting natural light reach inside. Underground, you'd have multiple levels for all the pipes, wires, and transportation that keep a city running. The whole idea was to prove that cities don't have to be built around cars and traffic jams. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman wanted to show the world that you could design a place where people actually come first. But as you're about to see, turning that vision into reality turned out to be way harder than anyone expected. The ambitious beginning. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman announced the line on January 10, 2021. The computer graphics they showed looked like something straight out of a sci-fi movie. The timeline they gave was pretty wild, too. They said the whole thing would be done by 2030. Let's do some quick math here. 106 miles of buildings, each 500 meters tall, finished in 9 years. That means they'd need to build about 10.5 miles of skyscrapers every single year. That's really fast. But people around the world got excited anyway. Architects started debating whether you could actually build something like this. Engineers questioned whether the physics even worked. Environmental groups raised red flags about what this would do to the desert. But Saudi Arabia didn't slow down. They had the Public Investment Fund backing them up with close to $1 trillion. By October 2021, just 9 months after the announcement, excavation started at the site. Huge machines started carving through the desert. Some of the world's top architecture firms got involved. Companies like Morphosis, HOK, and OMA all wanted a piece of what could become the most famous building project of our lifetime. The government put a price tag on just the first phase, $320 billion by 2030. Half of that would come from the Sovereign Wealth Fund, which is basically Saudi Arabia's giant savings account from oil money. Construction companies from all over the world lined up, hoping to get contracts. Saudi Arabia marketed the line as way more than just another construction project. They called it a bet on technology, on sustainability, on a future where the country didn't need to rely on oil anymore. Officials said the finished city would create 460,000 jobs and add $48 billion to the country's economy every year. For a nation with vast oil wealth and big dreams, $1 trillion seemed like money they could actually spend. But you know what they say about the best laid plans, right? Construction reality check. Let's talk about what's actually happening on the ground. The numbers are pretty mind-blowing. By February 2024, construction crews had moved over 90 million cubic meters of dirt and rock. That's like digging out several mountains. They drove 6,000 giant concrete pillars called piles into the ground across 1.24 miles. These piles create the foundation that would eventually support the buildings. The workforce grew to 140,000 construction workers by the middle of 2024. Things kept moving forward. Concrete was poured for different sections. Foundation work for parts near something called the Hidden Marina got close to finishing. In November 2024, NEOM hired Deligan Meisel Associated Architects and Gensler to lead the design work. That showed the project was evolving from just ideas on paper to actual construction plans. But here's where things get real. Behind all these impressive-sounding achievements, Saudi Arabia had to make some major changes to their plans. In April 2024, Bloomberg reported that officials now expected to finish just 1.49 miles of the line by 2030. That's less than 1.5% of what they originally promised. The population numbers got cut even harder. Instead of 1.5 million people living there by 2030, the new target dropped to fewer than 300,000. That's like going from planning a megacity to planning a decent-sized town. Saudi officials tried to spin this positively. They said they didn't give up on the full vision. They just needed more time. The complete project would now finish by 2045 instead. Some people even suggested it might take longer than that. Then came the really bad financial news. In August 2025, the Saudi Public Investment Fund took an $8 billion write-down on their gigaprojects, including NEOM. A write-down is basically an accounting way of saying we spent this money, and it's worth way less than we thought. The fund valued all their giant projects at $56 billion at the end of 2024. That was down over 12% from the year before. The line was running into the same problems that hit almost every mega project in history. Costs go up, timelines slip, reality doesn't match the promotional videos, except with the line, all these normal problems got multiplied because the project itself was so wildly ambitious to begin with. Enter China, the game changer. So Saudi Arabia looked at their mounting costs and their skeptical Western investors and basically said, we need a different partner. That's where China comes in. And this isn't just about money. It's about expertise, equipment, and the willingness to actually show up and do the work. The numbers tell you how serious this partnership got. Chinese investment in Saudi Arabia jumped 30% in 2024, going past 31 billion rials. More than 750 Chinese companies now work in Saudi Arabia. They brought construction knowledge and capabilities that most other countries just can't match. Chinese companies didn't just write checks. They rolled up their sleeves and got to work. China Power Construction took over the piling work for the line's foundation. That work started way back in August 2022, and it's still going today. China Railway Construction Corporation finished a horizontal tunnel project in the middle of May 2024. This was the first Chinese company to actually complete a NEOM project. That tunnel work proved something important. Chinese firms could deliver on time even in the tough desert environment. A company called Sunshine Power provided special equipment called inverters and a massive energy storage system that can hold 400 megawatt hours. This stuff is critical for NEOM's green hydrogen project and all the renewable energy plans. SUMEC, which is part of China National Machinery Group, supplied diesel generators to keep all the construction equipment and worker facilities running. Sany Heavy Industry sent its construction equipment to the site. Their machines ran for over 1,000 hours without a single breakdown. When you're building something this big, reliability like that matters a lot. The two countries made their partnership official through a bunch of high-level agreements. In September 2025, Saudi Arabia and China signed 42 investment deals worth more than $1.74 billion. These weren't just promises on paper. They covered real stuff like construction materials, water treatment equipment, semiconductors, and processed products. In April 2024, NEOM took its pitch straight to China. They did this roadshow thing called Discover NEOM, hitting Beijing, Shanghai, and Hong Kong. Over 500 top business and industry leaders showed up to hear about the line, Oxagon, Trojena, and Sindala. They got detailed presentations about where they could invest, when things would get built, and what kind of new technology would be used. The CEO of NEOM, a guy named Nadmi Al Nasser, made it clear that working with China would keep playing a huge role in NEOM's development. He mentioned that NEOM had already partnered with over 15 major Chinese businesses and even invested in several Chinese startups. This partnership made sense for both countries. China has this massive global project called the Belt and Road Initiative, where they build infrastructure all over the world. Saudi Arabia has Vision 2030 DARS, where they want to transform their economy. These two plans fit together naturally. The trade numbers between the two countries show you how big this relationship has become. In 2010, they traded $36 billion worth of goods. By 2025, that number hit nearly $400 billion. Saudi Arabia became China's biggest economic partner in the Middle East. They're also China's #1 supplier of crude oil in the entire world. But NEOM offers China something beyond just making money right now. It's like a showcase for Chinese construction technology, engineering skills, and project management. The whole world is watching NEOM. If Chinese companies succeed here, it opens doors to infrastructure projects everywhere else on the planet. Why China is watching so closely. For China, NEOM is way more than just another overseas construction job. Think about it from their perspective. Saudi Arabia is their biggest economic partner in the Middle East. The oil that comes from Saudi Arabia fuels a huge chunk of China's economy. So anything that affects Saudi Arabia matters to China. But there's more to it than just energy security. NEOM works as a testing ground for Chinese infrastructure technology on a world stage. When Chinese firms finish projects at NEOM, they're basically showing off their skills to potential customers everywhere. The scale and ambition of the line and the other NEOM developments create exactly the kind of high-profile showcase that Chinese companies need to compete for big international contracts. The opportunities cover tons of different industries. Construction materials flow from Chinese factories to Saudi building sites. Products manufactured in China support NEOM's development. Water treatment equipment, which any desert city desperately needs, is another area where Chinese companies excel. Just in the semiconductor sector, China invested $4.26 billion in Saudi Arabia during 2023. That's setting up the technological foundation that NEOM needs. Technology transfer happens alongside all this hardware. Chinese firms don't just drop off equipment and leave. They share knowledge and help build local skills. This fits perfectly with Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 goal of developing its own industries instead of importing everything. China's Silk Road Fund showed how deep this commitment goes by buying a stake in ACWA Power, a Saudi renewable energy company that plays a crucial role in NEOM's green hydrogen project. There's also a geopolitical angle here. Saudi Arabia's embrace of Chinese involvement in its signature project reflects what people call an Act East policy. Part of this shift comes from Saudi Arabia feeling like the United States isn't as interested in the region as it used to be after decades of heavy involvement. The US noticed this happening and set up competing infrastructure working groups to counter Chinese influence. For China, NEOM validates its whole approach to economic diplomacy through infrastructure. The Belt and Road Initiative found a willing partner in Saudi Vision 2030. Both countries frame this as win-win cooperation. Whether they're building ports, railways, or futuristic linear cities, the partnership shows that China can deliver large-scale infrastructure projects that other nations struggle to finance or actually build. Here's the thing, Saudi Arabia is watching closely to see if Chinese firms can deliver on their promises. But China is also watching just as closely. They're learning what works and what doesn't. They're testing their technologies in extreme desert conditions. They're figuring out how to manage projects at this unprecedented scale. Every lesson learned at NEOM gets applied to future projects around the world. That makes this partnership about way more than just one city in the Saudi desert. It's about the future of how developing countries build their infrastructure. The challenges and controversies. The line's technical and financial problems are just part of the story. There are human and environmental costs that make this project a lot more complicated than the glossy promotional videos suggest. Let's start with the money situation, because it's gotten pretty crazy. Initial estimates put the cost at $1.6 trillion back in 2021. Now, some analysts think it could reach $8.8 trillion or more. That's a massive jump. These ballooning costs forced Saudi Arabia to try funding approaches they'd never used before. They issued bonds for infrastructure projects, including plans to raise up to $1.3 billion through Islamic bonds called sukuk. In a really significant move, Saudi Arabia sold 0.64% of its stake in Aramco for about $12 billion, specifically to fund NEOM. Aramco is their national oil company and basically their crown jewel, so selling any piece of it shows how serious the funding crunch got. The human rights issues run way deeper than spreadsheets and budgets. The spot where they're building the line used to be home to the Huaytat tribe. These people had lived on that land for generations. Building the line required moving them out. Reports documented forced evictions. Entire villages got bulldozed to clear space for construction. Then things took a really dark turn. 3 tribal members got sentenced to death for refusing to leave their land. Human rights organizations around the world condemned these sentences. Saudi authorities defended their actions, saying the development was necessary. The migrant worker situation adds another troubling layer. There have been allegations claiming 21,000 migrant worker deaths connected to Vision 2030 projects since 2016. Saudi officials disputed these numbers and questioned how they were calculated. But with 140,000 workers at sites like the line by mid-2024, questions about safety, working conditions, and how workers get treated become really important. Environmental concerns go beyond the usual construction impacts. Scientists who study birds warned that a 500-meter-tall, 106-mile-long wall of mirrors would create a deadly barrier for about 2.1 million birds that migrate from Europe to Africa every fall. Species like endangered saker falcons and Egyptian vultures fly right through the area where the line would stand. The mirrored exterior that's supposed to minimize visual impact could end up being deadly for birds that can't tell the difference between a reflection and open sky. A researcher named Philip Oldfield from the University of New South Wales did the math on carbon emissions. He calculated that just the glass, steel, and concrete needed for the project would generate around 1.8 gigatons of carbon dioxide. That's a gigantic carbon footprint. It contradicts NEOM's zero emissions promises and raises serious questions about whether truly sustainable construction can happen at this scale. Technical feasibility keeps getting debated by architects and urban planners. Researchers from the Vienna Complexity Science Hub looked at the design and said a circular city would work way better than a linear one. They calculated that in the line's linear form, the average distance between 2 people would be 35.4 miles compared to just 1.8 miles in a circular city. Only 1.2% of the population would live within walking distance of any random resident. In a circular city, that number would be 24%. The proposed ultra-high-speed rail system is supposed to solve these distance problems, but the 316 miles per hour trains were still in prototype stages as of 2023. Only short test tunnels had been dug. All these challenges stacked together create a credibility problem that no amount of official statements can easily fix. Latest developments and what's next. Recent updates from the World Economic Forum in Davos during January 2025 gave us a clearer picture of what the line actually looks like now. Dennis Hickey, who's the Chief Development Officer at NEOM, laid out plans focusing on finishing the first 3 modules. These would house between 200,000 and 250,000 people. The vertical construction phase, where they actually start building upward instead of just digging foundations, was supposed to begin by the end of 2025. That's when you'd start seeing the actual structures that would make the line look like the images in all those promotional videos. Progress on other parts of NEOM shows that the broader project keeps moving forward. Oxagon Port is fully operational now, handling cargo and establishing the industrial infrastructure needed to supply construction materials. Trojana, which is a mountain resort, is moving ahead with preparations to host the 2029 Asian Winter Games. Hotel brands like W Hotels and JW Marriott have secured properties there. Sindala, a luxury island development in the Red Sea, actually had a grand opening, becoming one of NEOM's first finished attractions. The way officials talk about timelines has changed a lot. They started openly discussing what they call a 100-year vision. They're now saying the line will take 100 years, or whatever time is needed to fully build and populate. That's a huge departure from the original 2030 completion target. But officials insist they haven't given up on their goals. They just adopted what they call more realistic timeframes. Construction hasn't stopped despite all the scaling back. Excavation work keeps going along the planned route. Piling operations expanded to new sections. The utilities spine, which is the underground infrastructure carrying water, electricity, and data throughout the line, advanced through multiple areas. These foundation elements will support whatever structures eventually get built above them, whether that happens in 2030 or 2060. There are plans for something called a stadium in the sky as part of Saudi Arabia's successful bid to host the 2034 FIFA World Cup. This venue would be integrated into the line's structure, giving people an actual reason to visit and justifying the completion of central modules. They're promising demonstrations of the AI-powered mobility system in the coming years, which would give us glimpses of the technology that supposedly lets residents travel the city's entire length in just minutes. The messaging from NEOM changed from emphasizing speed to emphasizing sustainability and long-term vision. Officials don't talk about breakneck construction timelines anymore. Instead, they highlight multi-generational thinking and sustainable development principles. This shift basically acknowledges what became obvious to everyone watching from the outside. The line, as originally conceived, was not going to happen by 2030 or anywhere close to it. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel and click the screen now for more amazing